reset. It is, wow, what time is it UTC? Because it's 8:15 in the morning here. What time is it over there in England?
It's 4 p.m. here. It's 3 p.m. UTC.
Okay.
I need to get a coffee. Be right back.
Bye. So where's that link?
The Europeans are awake, but the Americans are still sleepy time.
Sleepy time. Okay, so new dev blog is out. So we'll do a reaction on that since this is kind of interesting. As a part of ongoing research and development initiatives, that aim is to set EVE Online up for its third decade of success. We are working on a project that involves running EVE client in a browser. So they're not releasing it. They're saying they're working on it.
Yeah, it's something it must be something they've been working on for a while, because this is not a trivial thing to do, not in the slightest. It's also very, very weird. Like, I don't think anybody could have called this as a strange thing to suddenly announce.
Well, let's have a look here.
It's interesting that they only seem to speak about it as an experiment, and they don't really imply that it's hard and fast, we're definitely going to do this. It's just, we're going to play with something like this.
Oh, so it's an experiment. Well, this is... All right, so when you first said it, I thought, what? You can play EVE on a web browser now? But you're saying that it's something they're going to work on for better access later.
Yeah, at some point you will be able to play EVE in a web browser as part of an experiment. What the whole wider experiment exactly is not clear. I'm going to take a wild guess and say this is something like Google Stadia. Making the actual client work natively in a browser is a monstrous task. I don't think they've done that. I think it'd be a case of like say Stadia, GeForce Now, whatever the PlayStation one's called, where the game is actually played on a server and they just stream the video and the actions to you.
Well, if you think about it, this is something that, well, I don't really want Cable in here, but this is something that Cable keeps screaming about, right? Because if you think of some of the functionalities of EVE Online, a lot of them can actually be run in something like a web browser. It's really only when you undock, and that's where Hadean becomes interesting, right? So you could have this thing where some aspects of the game functions fine in this, but some aspects might actually require you to log into the actual client.
Yeah, potentially, but I don't know. The way that they talk about skipping the immediate download step makes it really sound to me like it's not the client in the browser. The words are kind of confusing, but it's a remote client being rendered in the browser is what I think it's going to be, because that's much quicker, much easier, and far less trouble to maintain. Because otherwise you've got to essentially rebuild some of the real core parts of the engine to be able to do this, which is, well, this could be a sign of, if it is that case that they're actually making it run natively, it could be a sign of they are rebuilding core of the engine, which has far wider implications. But I don't really think it's wise to go down that rabbit hole, because we don't know how on earth they're going to be doing this. This is one of the weirder news articles I've seen in a long time regarding EVE.
Oops, you did it right. I just put the link in there.
So the interesting how they're talking about how they're going to experiment it. So it seems like they're probably going to use some basic technology to check while you're signing up for the first time. Of course, it's all speculation just based on roughly how I know these things can be done. They'll check your internet connection as you register. And if you've got a really nice speedy connection, instead of sending you to the page where you download the EVE client, they'll dump you into this new magical web-based version. and get you straight into the game, which could be quite interesting. If you clicked register, typed in a username, click next, and then bam, you're in a character creator. That's going to be an interesting experience for sure.
I'm just hoping that they're going to obviously open this up very early on and basically give us at least the station functionalities with something like this, because that would be fun.
Well, one of the reasons I think it's very likely to be a running it remotely on a server, not actually playing the game in the browser kind of system, is because this would open the door to quite easily running many alphas and stuff like that. Because you can just open up Firefox on incognito, job done. Now I've got 2 alphas running. So it's the big giveaway that it's a remote server and not actually converting the game to work in the browser is that they will be only available to users with a good internet connection. And where do you see such other wording on services like Stadia and GeForce Now, where you have to actually stream the game client live? And also the fact it's only aimed at new players. So it's just so that, like I said, you register for the first time and you go straight into the character creator and you get to experience the game. And I imagine while they're taking you through the tutorial, they tell you to download the full client at some point, because they can't offer this wider to all players, because if it is a remote streaming service, if they offer it to every single player, they've got to pay for all of those servers to run everyone's client, which is insane, and would also enable essentially infinite multi-boxing on one machine as another thing. It's a bit of a wild one, but I think I'm willing to put money down at this point. It's a GeForce Now style remote connection. I don't know what they call it, live game streaming system.
Mm-hmm. Well, the big, I guess, objection to GeForce is botting will be easier to do since you won't be taxed by clients on your desktop.
Yeah, that's another risk. It would take me all of 15 minutes to write a bit of JavaScript to be a mining bot in my browser if they were going to go down that route. So I very much doubt it's going to be something that is continually widely available should this experiment go the way they want it to. It will just be an experiment for new players to play around without having to fully commit to downloading the client.
Well, again, if you think about it, it's very much along the lines of that whole transplant way of thinking, right? If you want to make Eve possible for the next decade, they have to figure out how to do that and how to fix some of their antiquated issues. And that means transplanting a lot of gameplay stuff. So the fact that they're experimenting with this makes complete sense to me.
It's an odd project to suddenly come up with. It seems like this was not to be derogatory, but like a crackpot idea that somebody's just suddenly came up with and gone, here's a crazy thing we can do.
Well, it's really not that crazy. If you go back to thinking about the features and functions that do not require that much from your client, right? So all the functionalities that could easily be done in a browser or on a tablet or on a phone, right? So whether you're talking about fiddling with your character, playing with the market, organizing industry, browsing through your hangers, all that stuff doesn't require a massive client.
I think one thing that probably should try and head off, at least for CCP's benefit, before they get some poo-poo thrown at them.
It's too late.
There's already people talking of like, oh my God, they're spending so much dev time on completely converting the game to work on a browser. I doubt it. They've probably spent a couple of sprints, a couple of weeks of 1 or 2 devs just making it work on, as I said, a GeForce Now style platform, which compared to, in quotes, fixing the game is trivial and does not create technical debt for the game as a whole. So calm down, close Reddit.
Yeah, don't continue this conversation on Reddit.
Yeah, but it's already. I mean, even our own Discord here that we're showing is getting some first reactions that don't seem that enthusiastic.
And seriously, sorry, okay. CCP, when you've already come out with one dev block that is taking flack, don't come out with a second just after on a completely different topic, because it's going to have a slant of negative opinion from the get-go.
Yeah, that's the thing. That was a bit dubious when it first came out. There was a apparent typo, you could call it, where they have this chart of the two prices, the original 1 month, the original 3, 6, and 12-month prices. In the left column, they had the original, and on the right column, they had the updated pricing. And what had happened was in the left column, they had done 1 month, 1 month times 3, 1 month times 6, 1 month times 12. Whereas in the right-hand column, they've done 1 month, 3-month package and 6-month package and 12-month package, which doesn't sound like that big a difference. But as you buy more months, the price is discounted. And in the left-hand column, this wasn't being shown. So it was a bit misleading. So it seemed like the 12 and 6-month packages, I believe, had gone down in price, when actually the opposite is true. Across the board, for the UK, your subscription is now £2 to £3 more expensive for each level of the package. I think actually the 12 month has gone from 80 something to 100. I can't really see it on the screen at the moment, but it's a 15%, 20% increase across the board, across all the packages. They also increased the prices of skill extractors, which I'd completely forgotten you could even buy them with cash.
I'm wondering, why did they raise the price in pounds only? Why not the other ones? Or is that still to be announced?
Well, we can go into a long story of how exactly it happened, but the British pound sterling is kind of in the toilet and has been for a while. So they kind of wanted to balance the prices, and they've been doing this for a while. Because was it the Russians that they balanced the price for recently, and that caused a bit of a ruckus.
But is it really? Is the pound really suffering that much? I'm not seeing it.
Yes, that's all I'm going to say. It's not worth the political argument, but yeah, the pound is not what it once was. Not what it was once they originally, I imagine, set the ratios for. I suppose the core question is where do they get the sort of true price, and then they obviously calculate from that true price off to whichever currency, and then wiggle the numbers up and down a bit until it makes a nice round number. I think it's just a case of, well, the world's changed, currencies have changed, so why not, to be fair to them, why not review them and pull them around into the right place? With the Russian change was mainly to get rid of the arbitrage problem of just whacking on a Russian VPN and screwing around for a bit, and then ta-da, you got your Plex half price or whatever well, that's a bit of hyperbole, but that was the rough idea and the rough problem that existed at the time.
Well, if it's not going to cost them subscriptions and purchases, it's fine with a bit of correction. And if it helps their wallet, maybe we can get some good dev hours.
Yeah, extra pennies in CCP's pocket. As much as it's annoying to lose some pennies at your own, it's for the greater good, shall we call it?
Well, someone needs to pay the salaries for all the new hirings that they're making for at least the London office.
Someone needs to pay for their cool new Icelandic office.
That too. We still haven't gotten a video showing us the new facilities, which I'm disappointed at.
I think they showed it empty.
Yeah, a few pictures, I think, but we should get one of those former CCP guard does a video tour of the new offices.
Yeah, I suppose worth repeating to the people that are turning up at this point, we just wanted to quickly talk about, because it's literally just dropped just now, is they are changing or doing something to enable you to, and when I say you, this is probably always going to be limited to new players that have just registered, play Eve from within your browser, from within Chrome, from within whatever browser it may be, Firefox, whatever. All the signs when you read into the sort of read behind the text imply that it will be a system along the lines of GeForce Now, Google Stadia, and various other products where the game is actually played on a remote server, and then they stream the video of what's happening back to you live, and your inputs are streamed back and forth. So one of the huge advantages of this is actually that's not really been touched on, although there's not been time to touch on it because we've only been talking about it for 10 minutes, is if you've got an absolute potato of a computer, as much as Eve is not that demanding, you can run, at least for the first time you play it, you can run Eve in the most beautifully high graphics settings, so they can really get to show off how nice things are.
Think about the expansion possibilities of adjacent players. Get localization tied in with that. Pretty good.
Not sure how it will work into that, but we'll have to see. It is an interesting endeavor because it could be expensive. That's the concern. If you've got to run a lot of servers to run a lot of clients, that's a lot of PCs you got turning away. It ain't cheap.
I think it pushes demand towards having a good connection, not a good computer.
Well, yeah, but that's been a sort of gaming ecosystem push in general. Like, not only have you got things like Google Stadia, which I'm sure some people will comment has been a bit of a commercial failure, as has pretty much every product like that in the recent past. It does feel like it's just something that's not ready for the prime time yet. But the gaming industry as a whole is pushing towards instant gameplay, which only true streaming can provide. And on the other side of the coin of still requiring a connection, I mean, just look at the latest Call of Duty. It's something ridiculous, like 90 gigabytes download. Monstrous game patches are going to become quite common. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but if you look at the new games consoles, PS5 and the Xbox Biddly Bong, whatever it's called, they're flaunting some incredibly high-speed storage devices, which means that they can load in levels really quickly, for example. But you only need a high-speed storage device to load in such a huge level if you've got a huge level in terms of how much data it requires. And that level has got to get to your Xbox somehow, and you're going to have to download it. And it's going to be probably going to see multiple hundreds of gigs games in the next couple of years. So if you're on dial-up, I think it might be time to upgrade. I'm interested to see if people get particularly upset when they make a new character and they get to play the character creation screen in 4K, the finest detail, maximum settings. They go through and they do the tutorial and it all looks amazing, and then they download the client onto their 6-year-old Acer netbook and open the client and it just looks like cheese. So they might want to be aware of the potential gulf that will appear between what people experience when they just register and try this magical browser system, and then when they actually get to experience the client for real.
I like your quote there. Can you read it?
The bold one. It is not a major dev endeavor, because this is because people are just freaking out right now. Oh my god, they've spent so many hours and dev time that they could have been fixing supers and doing backflips down the office, but no, they've wasted all this time working on some stupid port. Like, guys, a team that wants to do this could have probably done it in a weekend. And they the way this is framed, they probably did do this on a weekend. A couple of guys who splintered off from a team and wanted to do something interesting spent their evenings or weekends and did this. They have not wasted $1 bazillion of dev time. They have not neglected all kinds of wacky stuff. Like, just chill. Calm down. Reddit's on fire already.
Okay, so Tonia's comment is funny. In 2010, Eve was a game with a browser. In 2020, Eve is a browser with a game. That is funny. And be careful how we word things, because Matterall might get flashbacks back to the Summer of Rage.
But yeah, especially because it's, and this is just more and more. The more I think about it, more confirming it's almost guaranteed to be a streaming Stadia style service. This will not enable hacking. This will not enable botting, because it's just the client being streamed to you. You do not have access to the game. You do not have access to the code. You don't have access to the memory. You don't have access to the network. You know, it's not a new client. In fact, it's probably less hackable and less bottable than the desktop client, because you can't, for example, read the overview off of memory. You can't broadcast clicks. You can't mess with network calls, because it's all hidden behind the browser. And if you want to go tinfoil hat, they might even push for this system like this eventually, talking like in a decade or two, to be the only way to play the game, because it's far harder to cheat.
I like that. It's basically it's a black box, right?
Yeah, you can't install dodgy software when the only thing you have access to is a video stream. And the only thing that can go back and forth between that stream is the video, and player Matterall clicked on this position and pressed F2. That's it. How are you going to install your dank aimbot? It's one of those things that's going to take people a while to. I think maybe they've. I don't know. You can almost argue, does CCP want the wild speculation by the fact that they didn't claim that this is a streamed to the browser instead of a natively in the browser experience? Because I can already. I've not even refreshed it, but I can already imagine on Reddit there's 1,000 people saying my elite JavaScript hacks are going to destroy the goons and whatever else. It's just not going to happen, because that's just not going to how it works. And if that is how it works, I will give you 100 billion if you manage to make some magic browser exclusive bot. Because you can't, because it's just a game on a stream.
There you go, trying to make sense of stuff, but stop doing that. People need their salt and their read.
The aliens injected Google Chrome into Hilmar's brain, and then he became a browser. I don't know.
Just seems like E would become device independent.
It will, which is actually kind of neat. I say again, they're restricting this, from the sounds of it, to only first time. I'm predicting it to be a first run only. So you're using an email address that's never been registered before. So they know that you're definitely a true new player. Of course, that can't be guaranteed, but anyway, they know you're a true new player, and it's the first time you've signed in on the website. They will take you to this streamed client. You'll get to play it, and then you get to download it in the background to play later when you're fully into it. So there's no concern because it won't be accessible to you beyond that first play as a new player. I wouldn't worry about the alphas blotting out the sun. And also it's going to be limited slots, I imagine. Seeing as it is a hosted service, there's probably only going to be a few hundred available seats, as it were, a few hundred clients that can potentially run at once. Because otherwise you run out of server space, or you end up having to open your wallet for server space, which for an experiment like this, I can't imagine them wanting to truly shake their pockets up and down and get all the pennies out.
I think this is one of those examples where it would be really nice to get a little bit more information than is actually in that dev blog, and maybe some demonstration of what they're actually talking about, and maybe cover some of those security issues, right? Because to play devil's advocate just for a second, when it comes to the race against botters and people that code bots, this is a losing game, right? The developers keep losing no matter what they do. The cost to make things secure and anti-botting is just too high. I think someone mentioned recently that was basically what World of Warcraft suffered when they tried to do that whole Guardian solution and whatnot. It became an endless battle, and they ended up actually giving up on it, right?
I think so, yeah. I know, I don't know if they still do it, but I think Dota and Counter-Strike did something similar as well. If you got reported a couple of times, a community player who'd been seen as trustworthy got to watch your video, watch your stream at least, or recording of you playing, and then they would vote whether you were suspicious or not. Which sounds like a great system, but yeah, I don't think they were that successful because I think the uptake was too low or something like that.
And I think we're in for, or I think we deserve another one of those CCP streams with talking about tech and talking about problems and talking about solutions down the pipe, without going too much into the and screeching and yelling about things, because I do think that CCP are very much aware of the problems. And again, this is back to the whole thing. Do we keep investing in this old game if it doesn't have growth, right? And how can we get it back in growth? If echoes bring a lot of people, sure, it might still be valid to keep working on it. But some of the costs to these things is so high that it's not really potentially worth it, especially if CCP ends up having success with other titles, right?
Right. And this potentially, depending on how it goes, has the ability to remove maybe not the biggest, but a significant roadblock to trying the game the first time. You know, nobody likes to have to sit there and download the launcher, put their account into the launcher, wait for it to install, launch the game. Oh, now I've got to pick my character. You know, there's that whole tedium of that first time to actually just play the game for 5 minutes and see if you like it. That will be gone. So hopefully that can bring some growth.
Or play it again because it's just right there.
Sure. And as I kind of distracted myself earlier, but to answer your question, Matt, this does mean that, yeah, you could play this on a Chromebook, and I would dare say, as long as your phone's got a big enough screen for it not to be incredibly awkward, you will be able to play the full Eve client on your phone without trouble. Apart from the trouble of it being really tiny and you've got fat fingers and you're poking F1 with your giant fingers, it ain't going to work. But yeah.
There's no chance of you being able to read the overview. I'm just telling you that you will not be able to read that at all. It's going to be a weird little thing up in the corner of your screen, and it makes no sense. Basically, the majority of your real estate on a phone will not really make any sense, but space will look nice.
If you want to be real wild, with a little head scratching, you could probably get this to work on your Nintendo Wii. I mean, it would work. It's got a browser. Why not?
I will say that the Switch is a nice platform for something like this.
Not a terrible idea, actually. I'm surprised they didn't look into Echoes for
It should
Switch.
be. Echo should definitely be on Switch because the screen is exactly the right size. So it's such an obvious pair that it bothers me a little bit that I can't play it on my Switch.
But when you think about it, and my thought was inspired by somebody pointing out that a lot of game streaming services suffered because of latency. You press the attack button and your character takes like even a quarter of a second to swing his sword. That feels really muddy and janky. But that's not an issue with Eve. Eve already works on 1 second ticks. Every action you make takes a whole second to, up to a whole second, just to be technically correct, to occur. And adding even a quarter of a second, which is going to be quite significant. Most streaming services are nowhere near that bad. Adding a quarter of a second to a game that already operates on a single tick, nope, non-issue. Absolute non-issue. Eve is the perfect game to be converted to a streaming service. That and maybe turn-based games are, as good as it gets. The streaming game services response times only become an issue in high-speed games like racing games, first-person shooters, maybe some strategy games, but the mouse interaction is done in such a way that the latency is basically not there. And also to answer other questions, this absolutely also means you could play Eve on your PlayStation, on your Xbox, on your Switch, on your phone, on your grandma's phone, on your Chromebook.
But the native browsers don't work, so something needs to be twiddled and fixed a little bit, right?
Oh yeah, it's technically possible as long as, I don't know, the PlayStation 5 comes out with a non-garbage browser.
Exactly.
Yeah, even your smart TV, please? There's another one.
Oh my god,
your smart TV can do it.
That's funny.
Your new 70-inch Samsung OLED now comes with Eve. You win.
And they don't have to develop for it.
And that's the beauty of using a streaming system. They do not have to develop compatibility for anything. They don't have to develop a Mac client anymore. They don't have to... Of course, before someone shoots me in the face, I'm not saying that they were going to stop it, but in theory, it means that they don't have to develop a Mac client. They don't have to look after the Linux client anymore. They arguably don't have to care about the Windows client. They could actually convert it all to a Linux client that's a bit more efficient and costs less to run, and be like, there you go, all done. But they don't need to care about whether it works in OpenGL or DirectX 9 or 64-bit or 32-bit. They don't need to care because it's only running on one system. They will have 1,000 servers that are all the same in one data center. So it just needs to work on that server, and it needs to work the best on that server. It'll be quite interesting to see when 100 people connect to the same streaming client server thing, whatever they're going to call it, and you get a node crash there instead of a system node crash. I'm going to reiterate because it keeps coming up in questions. This does not involve rewriting the game, and also it does not have any effect on tie-dye in either direction. This is essentially running the game on a computer somewhere else. Just for sake of imagination, there is a computer in the middle of CCP's office that's got an awesome graphics card and a big CPU. And that computer is going to play Eve for you, and it will stream to you, and your controls will stream back to it. Like, think TeamViewer, remote desktop, but more advanced and more directly suited for games. So there is no concern about having to rewrite code. Of course, there'll be some adjustments so it works better with this system, but it's not a monstrous rewrite task. It's not going to change tie-dye. It's not going to cause all such feature X, Y, and Z to get neglected. It's not going to break supers. And it's not going to enable alphas to blot out the sun with their AFK orcas.
So the question on a lot of people's mind, I'm sure, is, so will this make it easier for me to multi-box? How many of these clients can I have open at once? I'm just going to compare this to how many tabs I think I have right now. I think I have something like 40 open right now. Could I run 40 clients in potato mode?
I would say the question is, well, there's a requirement initially that it must be whether they're going to let everybody use it or just these new people that have just started. But if it is a GeForce Now whatever style thing, then every single the number of clients you can run will be go play as many YouTube videos in 1080p in as many tabs as you can, and when your computer sets on fire, that's your limit. I would say is a good guesstimate, which is going to be a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. But back to the important point that you mentioned with the convenience. I think that's really relevant. The fact that you can skip all that shenanigan about downloading and running a client and pretty much go straight into the game. It feels to me like CCP are starting to think about things from the Echo experience and growing a player base by actually making things a little bit less of a hassle, both when it comes to actually getting access to the game, but also the actual game, because we're seeing a lot of things that's changed in Echoes compared to EVE Online. Do you expect that they might actually pick up more things from EVE Echoes and introduce that in EVE Online?
Of course, no doubt that they're staring at Echoes right now and seeing what did work, what didn't work, what people loved and what they didn't. They're going to be, I imagine a lot of Echoes players are probably in the next few months going to get a bunch of survey emails and whatnot. So yeah, watch out for those. But of course they're going to study them. But I can't make a guess at what, because I haven't tried Echoes enough. I've tried it for a few hours. I liked it, but I don't know. I with Echoes, I find it sufficiently different that it's almost a different experience. But there's still going to be things that can be carried over from one to the other. Hints from the UI in particular, something they might move over. But I'm not sure how much of an effect that kind of feature has on retention. I think retention's almost and by retention, I'm meaning the unfortunately very low number of people that get EVE, they play it for a couple of hours, they close it, and they never come back. That number is very, very low. And I don't think you can point the blame at any particular features or any particular small group of mechanical issues or game client issues. I think that's potentially a fundamental issue, just to do with the nature of the game, but maybe that's a discussion for another time.
All right. Is that everything?
Can I just point out for Cable, mm-hmm. I'm saying a service like GeForce Now, a system in the same vein. Are you saying GeForce Now because it's a popular known service? And I came to this conclusion because one, it's limited to the number of people that can use it, because it's quite clearly for first time new registered players only. Two, it just seems insane to have potentially converted a game to work in the browser, because that would be a truly ungodly amount of time to do that. And three, it's immediate. So even if they had converted the game to work in the browser, somehow, say, as in like an actual rewrite of the game to work in the browser, you still need to spend a minute or two downloading the model for your little ibis that you're about to start in, the character things. They still need to download these things. And of course, I could be wrong. This is speculation, but based on what they've written, I know it's not a lot. There's just no way this is a rebuild of the client. This is absolutely going to be a streaming service of some kind. And again, GeForce Now, Stadia, the brand doesn't matter. It's probably not going to be from a major brand. It's not that complicated a product for CCP to put together themselves. And yes, that's dev hours, but it's not an incredible amount of dev hours. There's going to be maybe even open source or off-the-shelf products that you can purchase, plug your game into, plug a server in, Bob's your uncle. It's not going to be a there's not an army of 200 developers in a cave being whipped by Hilmar doing this. It's probably just a couple of guys doing something interesting.
So we should ask Dopamine when we can start beta testing or alpha testing this.
It'd be interesting to see how they do that, because the wording to me seems like they almost will spring it on players unannounced. You'd be creating another 500th alt one day, and oh look, I'm in the magical browser version. That'd be interesting. But it'd be up and up, sort of asking for trouble.
It's funny you roboted when you said they would be asking for trouble.
I said they'd be asking for trouble, but this isn't something to be worried about. Anyone that's running around screaming about my dev hours, put it back. It's fine. Don't worry. This is not the big scary thing. It's just a neat idea, and that's really loud music driving past that they're messing around with, and more power to them. It's a cool, interesting idea. It's a low risk, low investment thing to do. I think that's what we need to focus on. This is not a major job to do. It's something that can be done relatively easy and could have a potentially high payout. So that's why they've done it.
It's a major decision, but not a lot of tech work, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't want to trivialize it too much. It's not one dude in the corner of the office messing around. It's going to be a non-zero number of team members who know what they're doing and are very intelligent people. But they didn't spend the last 6 months doing this.
No, but just to take you back a little bit to what it will mean to the playability, right? Because if you have this, it is equivalent to what is capturing a lot of the Echo's player base, right? It's the, what do they call it? Eve on a party, right? But basically, you can carry it everywhere. You can do all of the small things on your tablet, right? If you could do a lot of the features in Eve Online on your tablet, check your PI, do some shipping, do some low-level requirement stuff everywhere, that is a huge step forward, like massively.
Are you talking about potentially they create a somewhat cut down version of the game that is served through this system?
I'm mostly thinking about you can just go in, check on your industry stuff, check on your market stuff, check on your PI, all the things that does not necessarily require you to undock and fly into space. Because, well, you could most likely do that if it's low effort stuff. So you could almost say, well, all the AFK stuff. But yeah, then we should start talking about the faucets and sinks in the game. But let's leave that aside. Let's imagine that we could all play Eve pretty casually on breaks and just go in and check some of all those things. I'd see that as a massive move forward, and I would definitely have this installed on my tablet or my laptop or whatever, so I could actually access it when I was not at home.
I don't think it will go necessarily that way. I think the closest you'll get to something like that is when you're on your lunch break at work. You can go into the shared office canteen computer that's been thoroughly disinfected because of coronavirus and go to eveonline.com and have a quick session, despite the fact you're not allowed to install anything on the computer. It causes no issues. Although the dark side of that is you might end up with a load of kids playing Eve in class.
I think as long as they are potentially playing customers, I think Hilmer and CCP will be fine with that.
I don't think the teacher's going to be too keen on that, though. Somebody screaming across the classroom, I've got a point.
Doesn't that depend on what is actually being taught in class? Because I'm sure there's some classes that could actually take advantage of letting people play EVE Online. I'm sure that in financial management that I used to study, we could have used a bit of EVE Online in class.
You reckon that you're going to get a bunch of college students doing the Oz's Alpha Challenge of making as much money as you can with an Alpha character in a few weeks?
Hey, that's a good challenge.
As part of their class.
Great challenge. We used to do 0 to 1 billion, who could do it the fastest. That was fun with an Alpha.
It would be interesting. I keep seeing these messages pop up again. It's frustrating me, but they're not providing a way for people to bot using a browser without any resources, because it's only for new players that have just signed in for the first time. I think second time you come to sign in, Mr. New Player, they're going to say, sorry, you've had your go download the client. And if they don't, then yeah, sure, you can say, well, they've just made botting easy. But I imagine if they open this to a wider service, you might start to see something like Eve Echoes is, I don't know what it's called. They've got the two stages of a mega. You'd have like a mega and a mega plus, and a mega plus grants you access to this streaming service, because the streaming service costs money. You know, it's not something that just comes out of thin air. Sure, when they update the game client, it doesn't cost anything cash wise, but when they let you play Eve remotely from the magical streaming server, that's costing them data, bandwidth, server time, which is not trivially cheap. I can tell you that much.
So you're saying this is going to be a paid service? So pretty much like buying access to the auction house in World of Warcraft, or actually signing into something like the NVIDIA thing?
Yes, think of it as a specialized NVIDIA GeForce Now service, which I don't really have a problem with. And again, the Eve's the perfect game for that, because it's such a low demand game. So they can probably get away with charging $3, $4, maybe $5 a month and still make some money from hosting the service. That territory is truly where you need to worry about, is this easy to bot? Easy to bot in the sense of it's easier because you can't see so easily what the user is running on the computer. You're locked into the browser's sandbox. But I don't think that's that much of an issue either, because if this is going to be a service, I bet you're not going to be able to pay for it with Plex. You're going to have to pay cash. And if I catch you botting, as in Mr. CCP catches you botting, and he's got your credit card, he's going to have a word. Yeah, so the botters are going to have to be financially invested instead of the guys that are just screwing around. The regular botters who pretty much fund their entire enterprise through Plex. They never give cash over. They never give any true contact details to Eve, to CCP. But when CCP says credit card, please, sure, they can use stolen credit cards or whatever else. But it actually, I would argue, makes botting harder. And yes, we do see chat.
Well, and they would definitely need to upgrade the the UI of the Hypernet to make it really tablet friendly?
Well, that's a different question, really. It's not directly related to this service, but yeah, they're going to have to, because the side effect of being able to run it in the browser is you can run it on every device imaginable. Every device imaginable has all kinds of wacky shapes and sizes of screen. So you might even see two interfaces, and this is, of course, me just spitballing out of my backside. But you might see an option to be able to switch to an Echo style interface if you're on a really tiny screen, or swap to the regular Eve style interface if you're on a more sizable screen. So I'd hope to actually potentially see some drive towards improving UI in that sense.
That's actually quite interesting that you could do shenanigans like that because you're doing it this way, because they're running that client in-house for you, right?
Exactly. So they could, I don't see why they would, but they could serve you a completely different client. So if they wanted to experiment with some potentially dubious features that someone like the Hobo Leaks fellas might really get their nose poked in and see some spicy information, they can do it because you don't have the client files anymore. You don't have access to the files, so you can't pull the files apart. So you can't speculate on what's coming by digging out the files, and you can't hack the. Not that you can't hack the game at all, but you can't hack the game by manipulating the files directly because you don't have them.
And I do like someone mentioning what you kind of already hinted at, the whole platform agnostic, the fact that you are completely platform independent when you start thinking along these lines. And I think it's funny because when you think about CCP's history, they have a little bit of a history with platform dependencies, and the fact that they might be moving in the complete opposite direction, going, we do not ever want to be platform dependent again. We want to be able to launch our stuff on every platform available. I just think that's kind of cool, and definitely that's a good business strategy.
I think I'm starting to think there is more to this experiment, at least in what they might be thinking to do with it. Like, the initial experiment does seem to be, yeah, you can skip that barrier of downloading the client for new players, but it does open a whole world of, and again I'm going to say it because it's just ridiculous and funny, running EVE Online on your Nintendo Wii if you really wanted to. So the possibilities are, as I say, endless. This is a interesting path forwards. And as I say, if it's going to be a paid service, again, wild speculation at this point, if it's going to be a paid service beyond the experiment where anyone can use it as long as they pony up the cash, I think it's actually a great move in terms of preventing botting and cheating, because it's going to be far harder to bot and cheat on a client that you don't have access to and a remote client that you've had to pay for.
I refresh the topic. Can you tell us what we're talking about?
So today, about an hour ago, CCP dropped a short article. I want to call it a dev blog, but it's not quite. It's just a couple paragraphs from Deep Dopamine talking about a research and development initiative that has been going on in CCP, where they are working towards being able to run EVE Online in a web browser. The reason they're doing this, that they're quoting, is to essentially remove the barrier when you first try the game. You don't have to sit and download the client, wait for it to download, install it, put your login details in, and everything else. It's just streamlining that process of the first time you ever play the game is what they seem to be talking about. And of course, it is full of the asterisk kind of thing of, this is a project, this is research only. We don't know what it's going to mean, but please give it a go when it comes out. There's no hint of when it comes out. There's no hint of any further detail other than we're going to run the game in a client, the game client in a browser somehow, and it's for an experiment to help new players. Beyond that, we don't really have any information. But they do refer to it as investing in the foundational technology of EVE Online, which makes me think this is going to be a far bigger thing than just, assuming it goes right, it's a far bigger thing than just helping new players. I think this could open the door to running EVE anywhere, yeah, on any device, at any place, at any time, without requiring any particularly high-end specs. And no, I don't think they'll can the desktop client, to those asking that.
But we're guessing, right?
Yeah, this is all guessing. I would say there is zero chance of the desktop client ever being discontinued, because a core tenet of the existence of EVE Online has always been that you could run it on your grandma's computer on dial-up without too many issues. And that's kind of mostly still true. So you can't do that when it comes to a 1080p 60 FPS stream. Your grandma's computer is going to blow up, and a dial-up is going to get a huge bill. So in order to keep that back compatibility of being able to run it on anything, I don't see the desktop client ever going anywhere. I mean, otherwise you've wasted your brand new RTX 3090 you just bought.
Do we want to talk about the cause at all, or are we going to leave that for the weekend?
Well, there was a show yesterday, wasn't there? Really, I imagine the Saturday/Sunday/insert day here show will go into that in further detail. I don't know. That's not my call. Why am I talking?
It's just because, everything has been exploding with discussion on this, right? And I think the thread node is now up to 1,200 posts on the Evo forums, which is something that usually only happens when there's something dramatic, right?
Yeah, but let's break. We'll come back and talk about that, the changes and upgrades. Okay.
Yeah, just one final again. Don't panic. They've not spent 1,000 dev years wasted on some project you don't care about. Chill out. It's not a big deal. It's a big deal because it's cool, but it's not a big deal in terms of consequences, negative consequences.
EVE on my Switch.
I kind of want to go buy an old Nintendo Wii just to do it.
Hold on, I might have some information. 1 second.
I wonder how many updates I'll get if I post a video of being the first person to ever play EVE Online on the Nintendo Wii.
There's something there from Dopamine that I posted in channel.
That's further confirmation to what I think is how it's going to work. Is that something that's to be shared, or is that super secret source?
Paraphrase it.
Well, the key for me is that final sentence, that this is a thing, that an idea and a task that has mostly been led by the marketing and publishing department, and has required minimal assistance from the developers. So again, if it requires minimal assistance from the developers, it certainly is not a conversion of the game client to run in the browser, because that would require all hands on deck for the next 5,000 years. And again, it's also confirmed that it will be limited to the first time you play the game after registering. After the first time you play the game, and I'm assuming it might even be time limited, you will be required to download the client to play again. So there's your botting concerns gone. There's your hacking concerns gone. There's your alphas times a bazillion concerns gone, unless you're talking about alphas that have signed up and somehow managed to gank your freighter in the first 15 minutes. In that case, oof, but it's not going to happen.
That is actually a really cool thing, right? If that's its focus, just to get people to play it fast and not have to wait for something like a big download. It's a little bit like some of the things that the PlayStation and